Are you ready to take your first steps towards financial freedom by investing in property? Whether you're a first-time investor or you've started your portfolio but need some help continuing to grow, 2022 REB Buyers Agent of the Year and Rising Star finalist Lachlan Vidler and his team at Atlas Property Group are here to help. As experts in property investment, Lachlan and his team are ready to help you take your next step in growing your portfolio. By completing the research, sourcing and negotiations, Lachlan goes the extra mile to find you a high-performing investment property. Visit atlaspropertygroup.com.au to book in your discovery call absolutely free of charge.
This is a Momentum Media production.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Smart Property Investment Show. I'm joined by my colleague today, Juliet Helmke, a journalist on the real estate suite here at Momentum Media. Juliet, thank you so much for taking the time today. I wrangled you in a little bit last minute, but I think it's probably a pretty important time for us to be getting together and just discussing what we're seeing from an editorial perspective.
Definitely. There has been so much going on over the past couple of weeks. So it's really good to cover all of it from, elections to industry conferences. It's just been a bit of a whirlwind, hasn't it, Grace?
Absolutely. And I think the first point we need to make today is that we have just come back from AREC. We've all had a little bit less sleep than we would have liked, but AREC, for those that don't know, is the biggest conference, in the calendar for real estate agents and property managers across Australia and New Zealand. Around 4,000 people, I think, descended on the Gold Coast over the last weekend. And it was a pretty amazing couple of days. Your first experience there, Juliet, how was it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was my first experience. So, to me, it was incredibly impressive. And I heard from a lot of people that it was just an absolutely great showing. You're right. We heard that there were 4,000 people there, having not been there before. I don't have anything to compare it to, but with the challenges of the last 2 years, I know that, last year when they were able to hold it, that attendance was down a little bit, working against COVID restrictions and all that sort of thing. This year, you could really feel people's excitement to just be able to get together and have those social experiences and have those one-on-one sort of face-to-face interactions. Everybody was remarking on it. I felt like, that it just felt like the industry was really fighting back from that position of the challenging times that COVID had wrought on everyone. So it felt really exciting. It felt like a lot of great energy was swirling around. And, I heard from people that the kind of tone and energy of things had really changed in terms of what was being discussed. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, especially Grace, having been there last year and then now sort of seeing it rebloom, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah, it's been a really cool period for the industry. I think a lot of real estate agents have taken a step back. And while it has been a wildly successful period, I don't think there's any real estate agent that would be saying that they've gone through a bad patch recently. I think we're seeing that, balance out again now that we are headed into a different marketplace. And, it's all about real estate agents now operating with transparency and integrity. And that transition has been going for a little while now, but I think it was really honed in on at the latest AREC conference. And I think that's, a really good sign moving forwards that, there's so much to be said for the legitimacy of the profession. And that was on full display over the weekend.
Absolutely. We had a lot of conversations about people talking about the transition into this market and how agents, you've got to be, in any market, there is really no fudging the truth, but especially in this market, how transparency, having honest conversations with your vendors, with the buyers is really key to setting people apart as to who's going to be able to push through and continue to lodge those really strong, those strong results, because of course there is that opportunity in this market, and how that might set them apart from people who will struggle a little bit as things change.
And there is, I think, as well, an opportunity for consumers to really be on the front foot with this as well. We're going to see investors who are picking and choosing the agents that they want to be working with. And that's where reputation does precede agents in the space. We're going to see buyers being a lot more picky about, and we're going to get to this a little bit further in the episode, how the market is tracking. But there's, an opportunity for investors out there to really be pragmatic about their approach, and agents really need to be paying attention to that as well. I did as well I feel like I need to give a shout out to Matthew McConaughey. It was pretty cool to have him beaming in live for the conference. Bit different, obviously there's a lot of, real estate heavyweights that are around at conferences like AREC, but not very often that people can say they've gotten the opportunity to hear someone of Matthew McConaughey's star power speak at something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was a lovely balance between, giving some insight into the ways that acting in some ways translates to the real estate profession, as well as the fact that, look, he's an incredibly charismatic person. He's written a great book about his perspective on life and success. And he really got into some of those sort of more general things that I think could be translatable to somebody in any industry who's looking to kind of take their career to the next step. So I thought it was really interesting, some of the takeaways in terms of, putting forward confidence as an actor, as somebody who has to, go into auditions, deal with rejection, maybe like 9 rejections out of 10 auditions, and how that can kind of relate to an agent and trying to win listings, putting your best foot forward, really putting your all into it, being like, oh, I think I got that one, and then having to deal with the aftermath of sometimes not getting it. And his perspective on that, I thought, was really interesting as a takeaway specifically for agents. Then in general, I also just really loved his thoughts on maintaining balance. It's something that we're finding the industry is having more and more conversations about. How do you make sure that you have, for, better want of a description, a work-life balance? For him, he really went through, it's not just work and life. Life is made up of a number of different aspects. I think he talked about his family, his role as a father, his role as a partner, his, connection to spirituality, and how he keeps those in balance while also sort of keeping his career driving. And I think all of that was probably really valuable for people. I found it valuable for myself, and it seemed like the audience really reacted so well to some of those insights.
AREC hasn't been the only thing that's been going on lately that's had a bit of an impact on property and real estate. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment with more updates from an editorial perspective.
Ever wondered how you can invest like the top 1% of Australian property investors? Henderson Advocacy has been at the forefront of helping everyday Aussies improve their financial freedom. So if you're a savvy investor or someone just starting out on their property journey, give Henderson Advocacy a call today. Head to www.henderson.com.au. Don't invest alone. Invest smarter.
Welcome back to this very special editorial episode where we're unpacking all the latest in the real estate and property space. Juliet, just before the break, we were talking about being up at AREC, the biggest conference of the year for real estate agents across Australia and New Zealand. But it kind of all comes against the backdrop, I think, and it's worth noting that we've just had the federal election, and a lot of you have probably heard some of my insights on that previously, but there's been a couple more recent developments that I think is worth touching on as well. It's looking like the Labor Party has just ticked over the line and achieved that clear majority in the House of Representatives, which required them to achieve 76 seats. But now I think it's looking likely that they're going to have won 77, which would make it an outright majority. But it's still a little bit of a watch this space kind of thing. Anyway, we've already talked at length about what a Labor government will mean for housing and property going forward. But just to recap that, we've got the Help to Buy scheme, which is an equity initiative that should be coming in fairly soon, I'm imagining. We also have the expansion of the new home guarantee and the regional scheme, all part of what was the first home loan deposit scheme that was brought in by the previous federal government. We're also seeing a $10 billion injection into Australia's future housing supply, which I think a lot of people are quite looking forward to happening. It's all part of that supply versus demand, and we're going to be seeing Australia's population continuing to grow. It's still a little bit stinted due to the pandemic and the lack of overseas migration, but I'm sure over the next couple of years we'll see that pick up again. But yeah, I think the most exciting thing is the appointment of a new housing minister. Juliet, I know you did a little bit of research on this over the last couple of days.
Yeah, absolutely. So that just came down the pike. And of course, it was something everybody in the industry was really looking forward to hearing who would be in that role. They also, as expected, elevated that position to a cabinet position, which was something that the real estate industry has been pushing for, and was, very pleasing to see when that announcement came down. But so Member for Parliament Julie Collins, who hails from Tasmania, has been appointed into that position as Minister for Housing and Homelessness. And she'll also be taking up the role as Minister for Small Business as well. So she's got quite a bit under her purview, but seems to be something that Ms. Collins might be used to. She actually sat in the role before in the previous time that the Labour government was in power for the last couple months of Kevin Rudd's tenure as Prime Minister. So I think it was only about 3-4 months that she was in that role as Minister for Housing and Homelessness, but she had a lot going on at that time as well. She was also, at that point, the Minister for Indigenous and Employment and Economic Development. She had previously been the Minister for Community Services. She was Minister for the Status of Women. And then, as I mentioned, Minister for Housing and Homelessness during that last administration. So she has a lot of experience that she brings into that role in a cabinet position. But she also has some, interesting background in her advocacy for housing issues. During her first speech to Parliament, she spoke very honestly about some of the issues that her own family had faced early on in her life with housing. She, after the death of her father at a very young age, she and her mother moved back into her mother's parents' house, so her grandparents' house, which was in council housing in Hobart, and were with them for a number of years until her mother remarried. And her parents at that point were able to buy a property, which they were in for no more than 12 months before some tough economic circumstances hit them, and they were back with her grandparents. So she speaks very eloquently and very openly about the importance of social housing for Australians and from her own perspective on it. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how she tackles this issue, how she really gets into it.
And I think there will be a really nice synergy there with the fact that, she's the Minister of Housing, but also supporting small businesses from that role as well. I think that actually, we see so many Australians who are operating small businesses who are looking to get on the property ladder. And, it's a real challenge at the moment how people can afford to do so. So to have both of those portfolios under her belt, I think creates quite a nice synergy.
I totally agree. And I think that it also, in many ways, makes a lot of sense for those to go together, because businesses, pretty much every business out there also has housing of their business as an important issue. And it's something that we see across the residential and the commercial market at the moment, are the issues of vacancy rates and the issues of rising rents in all aspects and rising prices for both of those sectors. So I think it's something that it really behooves the government to have those two together. And I think it will be great to see what she does with the position.
It practically epitomizes that tension point that we are seeing between inflation, which is the rising cost of living, and those struggles with wage growth. So to have that, reflected in someone's portfolio, I think can only mean good things, because it does show that there's an understanding there of how closely linked Australia's small businesses are with the property market. From the real estate perspective, at least, we see so many real estate agencies across Australia operating as small businesses. They've got their own staff to be looking after and taking care of. And then they're also transacting in property, which is, as we've said previously, it's the biggest deal. It's what everyone in Australia dreams of being able to achieve, owning their own home and getting on that property ladder. And then on from that, you see people looking to achieve financial freedom through property, and oftentimes using small business mechanisms to achieve that. So I think it will be a very interesting point in time that we're currently sitting in. And I guess we just need to see how it does all play out as some of those schemes do come into play, both the expansions and those new schemes that we're seeing. So that's all we can really say on it at this point. But I guess it will just be an interesting period going forward. And hopefully some of those independents as well are willing to play when it comes to that. I don't think any of them are, from what I've seen and heard, none of them are particularly opposed to housing continuing to be a major economic driver for Australia's future prosperity.
I think that's absolutely true. I think many of the people coming into positions in this new government and the independents as well are very conscious of the fact that housing was a big issue at play in this election. We had yesterday the president of REIA, Hayden Groves, emphasizing that in his welcoming of the new cabinet ministers and just reminding people that, it was something that a lot of people were voting on. And so it needs to be a big priority as we head forward. So I'm sure we'll continue to hear more about that. And yes, very much looking forward to hearing what the new Minister for Housing and Homelessness, as we just spoke about, will kind of, enact in her first days, weeks, months in the role. And I don't know, it'd be pretty great to hear it from her directly. I wonder if we can get her on the podcast, Grace.
It is definitely one of my priorities for the next couple of weeks. I've already had conversations with Phil too about maybe seeing if we could even get Anthony Albanese himself, the new Prime Minister, on board, but definitely to have the Minister of Housing would be a great coup as well. So watch this space. We'll see what we can actually achieve over the next couple of weeks. Hopefully they're pretty keen to be talking to people such as ourselves. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment.
It's time to get help. Interest rates are increasing. Inflation has hit an extraordinary 5.1%, and the chance to secure a golden egg property is getting narrower by the day. Dragan from Buyers Agency Australia has been presenting the facts and helping property investors make smarter, well-informed, educated decisions in property for years. So what are you waiting for? Get in touch with Dragan today at www.buyersagencyaustralia.com.au. Invest with integrity.
Welcome back to this very special episode where I'm unpacking from the editorial side some of the biggest stories that have been occurring over the last couple of weeks. And it has been a pretty huge month or so, I'm going to say, for real estate and property more generally. Juliet, looking at the numbers from last week's auctions, I don't know how this many auctions actually went ahead, considering I think, a majority of the real estate community was up on the Gold Coast at AREC, but we did see a spike last week, first time since Easter that numbers had been back up there when it did come to the capital city auctions. Interestingly enough, it's now, to date this podcast, it is the first week of June, and numbers aren't looking like they'll be as big this coming weekend. And I think that's pretty telling just of a normal market. We're probably seeing a little bit of that return to normality after a crazy couple of years, but we always see it does slow down in winter, and it will be interesting to see what the clearance numbers do as a result too.
Absolutely, and what those average prices are doing as well, because as we just saw for last month in CoreLogic's recent report of the property values, we have, for the first time since September 2020, national averages for house prices have actually just slipped into decline. And much of that, as was revealed in CoreLogic's report, came from the major markets of Sydney, Melbourne, and Canberra recording negative price growth. So while in a number of the other capital cities, things maintained fairly even or saw modest growth, as well as in the regions, we did still continue to see some growth in those, particularly in those lifestyle hotspots, with Sydney, Melbourne, and Canberra kind of taking a step back again. It pushed the national averages into decline. So I think it'll be interesting to see how things react to that. It's certainly something that had been anticipated, same as you were saying, Grace, with auctions, the number of auctions being held fluctuating and the clearance rate fluctuating a little bit. It is feeling a little bit like a return to normality. So everybody's kind of been keeping this in their sights, and it will remain to be seen how the coming weeks sort of play out.
Yeah, we've talked for a long time now about that two-speed market, but we've never just really seen it driven by Sydney, Melbourne, and Canberra as being the areas where it's been drops from them. Usually it's the regional markets that would be lagging. So I think And as what a lot of people have been saying over the last, few months even, it's just that normalization of the market that we're seeing. And I don't really think it's anything that people should be worried about out there. Obviously, a lack of price growth does directly correlate to consumer sentiment. People aren't as willing to spend as much, but it is coming back as normalization, considering the gains that we've been seeing over the past 24 months. That can't continue forever, especially against the backdrop of inflation and rising interest rates that we'll be, closely watching next week. Next Tuesday, the RBA will make their next cash rate decision. What are you expecting, Juliet? Do you think we'll see another bump to that to increase it even more?
I think we will. A lot of the watchers are saying that we will see another bump. And again, it's something that has been expected, whether next month or the month after that. We know that we're in for a period of rate rises. So I'm thinking that we'll probably see something else the next month. I could be wrong. What's your perspective on it, Grace?
I think we've been set up to expect one. I would actually be quite surprised if it didn't happen in this month, just because the way that the Reserve Bank of Australia has been talking, even they thought about pulling the trigger even more with that first rate rise that they did. There's been a lot of talk about, whether they should have actually just done that and gotten it out of the way. They've told the industry, the finance industry and the property industry to be bracing for further changes to occur. I think it would make sense for them to instigate that sooner rather than later. They're already playing catch up. So it's obviously something we don't know. I guess, a little bit of insight to everyone who is listening along. A lot of people think that we get some of this information under embargo. We hear a little bit earlier than that, but then that announcement is made public. But this is one thing that we cannot get any insider communication or goss on. Until 2:30 p.m. on the first Tuesday of the month, we have no idea what that rate decision is going to be. We can make educated guesses, but that is all it ever is. Until that 2:30 p.m. point, which I think would surprise a lot of people. They think that we do know a little bit more that's going on, but in this case, we don't.
Yeah, hopefully that's just because we do try to be very, hot off the trigger with getting that news out to everybody. Please continue to watch. If you're looking for those updates, watch our space. We always try to get them out as soon as possible. We do tend to have some commentary on what that will mean for people, but often we're receiving commentary for both sides and we're kind of ready to go with whatever the decision ends up being. So yes, unfortunately, no insider information from this side of things, but as soon as we know the news, you'll know the news.
Yeah, so basically what that means is if you're ever trying to contact us and it is 2:30 p.m. on the first Tuesday of a month, we're busy.
Yes.
We're extremely busy trying to crunch everything together. Always exciting though, because I think, it's always very telling as to how the industry is going and what we can expect moving forward. But we're still seeing some commentary. It is quite mixed around whether more rate rises will have an impact on affordability even more, whether we'll start to see a few more people suffering mortgage stress. And it really depends on who you're talking to about that. So, but at this point in time, the way that those serviceability buffers are in place, there should be a bit of cushioning room in there to support some of that.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing and that's what we're expecting.
So I guess all that's to be said from us still is just, watch this space. We'll keep you updated as soon as we do know about that RBA rate decision and what's going down. But thank you so much to everyone for listening in. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. Let us know if you want more editorial updates like this from myself and Juliet. We love talking about this stuff. We're dealing with it day in, day out. It's a great chance for us to check in with each other and find out some of the finer details of what's been going on. So let us know, like or review us on whatever platform that you do listen to your podcasts on. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au and stay up to date with us on our website. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever you look at for your social media. Until next episode, stay safe and well. Bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
It's safe to say the property market has been red hot over the last few years, with some of the markets we've selected in 2021 rising over 40% in a 12-month period. It's very likely that if you're a property owner, your property has gone up 20% minimum in value in the past 12 months, and you have most likely accrued sizable equity that can be recycled and extracted to build your investment portfolio. With interest rates increasing, you might be wondering where to invest to maximise capital growth and cash flow in 2022 and beyond. Well, to save you time, energy and guesswork, award-winning author and regular guest on the Smart Property Investment podcast, Paul Glossop and his team at Pure Property Investment have outlined the top 30 affordable suburbs poised for strong capital growth over the next few years with sound cash flow. Grab your free Top 30 Guide to Property Investment guide today at purepropertyinvestment.com.